Okay, let's start. Number 1. The mechanical dove of Archytas. Around 360 BCE, in the Greek colonial city of Tarentum, on the southern coast of what is now Italy, a man named Archytas builds something that has no category in any engineering tradition before or after him for the next 2,000 years. Archytas is not an obscure figure. He is a mathematician who solves the problem of doubling the cube, a statesman who serves as general of Tarentum 7 consecutive terms without a single military defeat, a Pythagorean philosopher whose works Aristotle studies and critiques directly, and a personal friend to Plato whose 7th letter credits Archytas with physically, intervening to save Plato's life when Dionysius II of Syracuse threatened to have him killed. When Archytas builds something and calls it finished, the people around him pay attention. What he builds is a mechanical dove, a bird-shaped device constructed from wood and metal components capable of flight under its own power. The account comes from Aulus Gellius, a Roman author of the 2nd century CE, writing in his Nox Atticae a wide-ranging collection of notes on history, philosophy, and science that modern classicists treat as a reliable secondary source for otherwise unattested facts. Book 10, Chapter 12. Archytas of Tarentum constructed a wooden dove that could fly. The Greek mathematician Phivorinus, a contemporary of the Emperor Hadrian, also references the device. Both authors treat it as historical fact rather than legend, a distinction that matters in Greco-Roman scholarly writing, where the difference between mythos and historia is precisely marked. The mechanism is not described. What we know is what it did. It flew, under its own generated power, not carried by a person, not thrown, not swung on a wire. The most technically defensible reconstruction developed by historians of ancient mechanics, including Serafina Cuomo of Durham University, involves compressed air or steam vented through controlled apertures to generate thrust, with the dove suspended on a balanced pivot to allow directional motion. The engineering is achievable with Bronze Age materials. The difficulty is not the materials. It is the knowledge of what to do with them. Archytas died in a shipwreck off the coast of Apulia around 347 BCE. The loss was noted. Horace marks his death on the Apulian shore. But the device he built raised a question the Pythagorean Brotherhood of Tarentum had been avoiding while he lived. Pythagorean philosophy was not a loose system of spiritual beliefs. It was a precise classification of the cosmos built on mathematical relationships. Central to it was the category of the psyche, the animating soul which separated living things that moved from within, from inanimate objects that moved only when acted upon from outside. A stone falls because the earth pulls it. A lever moves because a hand pushes it. An animal moves because a psyche inhabits it and generates motion from within. These categories were not metaphors. They were the fundamental ontology of a school that treated mathematics as the structure of divine reality. The dove moved from within. It was not alive. It generated its own motion through a mechanism, but mechanism was, by Pythagorean classification, inanimate. What Archytas had built was an object that violated the cosmological taxonomy his own philosophical tradition had established. Something that flew like a living creature, generated its own motion like a living creature, but contained no psyche. In Pythagorean terms, this was not a triumph. It was a transgression. The Brotherhood's inner council met in the weeks after Archytas's death. The decision they reached is preserved in fragments referenced by Phivorinus, and later discussed by Diogenes Laertius in his Lives and opinions of eminent philosophers. The dove and its related mechanisms were to be dismantled. The method of its construction was to be left unrecorded. Not because the Brotherhood lacked the means or the scribes, Archytas himself had left written works, fragments of which survived into the Byzantine period, but because the Brotherhood judged that a device which mimicked the properties of life without containing life had crossed a boundary that Archytas himself, in his final years, had reportedly grown troubled by. He had built the thing. He had also, according to Phivorinus, declined to build a second one. The first self-propelled flying device in recorded history was built in approximately 360 BCE. 13 years later, it was deliberately unmade. The next self-propelled flying machine that can be confirmed in any historical record appears in the late 18th century CEE. From a workshop in Tarentum, where a brotherhood buried the world's first flying machine out of reverence for the line between life and death, we travel east now to Han Dynasty China, where an imperial engineer built a machine that could read the movements of the earth itself, and where the dynasty that built it made sure that machine would never outlast its masters. Number 2. The Zhang Heng seismoscope, 132 CE, Luoyang, China. The eastern capital of the Han Dynasty and the most advanced administrative city on Earth. At that moment is home to an instrument that has no parallel anywhere in the ancient world. It sits inside the offices of the Taishi Ling, the Imperial Astronomical Bureau, and it is not available for public inspection. The craftsmen who built it are not permitted to describe its mechanism. And when the Han Dynasty collapses in 220 CE, the knowledge of how to build it goes with it. The instrument is called the Hufeng Didongye. Its inventor is Zhang Heng, mathematician, astronomer, geographer, and chief astronomer to Emperor and of Han, and it is the first seismoscope in recorded human history. Not a rough precursor, not a primitive forerunner. A calibrated, directionally accurate earthquake detection and location device that functioned reliably across distances of 500 miles. The exterior is a bronze vessel roughly 6 feet in diameter, shaped like a large jar, ornamented with mountain and animal figures. Around its circumference sit 8 dragon heads facing outward at the 8 compass points: north, northeast, east, southeast, south, southwest, west, northwest. Beneath each dragon head, on the ground, sits a bronze toad with its mouth open and facing upward. Each dragon holds a bronze ball in its mouth. When an earthquake occurs in a specific direction, the dragon facing that direction releases its ball. The ball drops into the waiting mouth of the toad below. The toad catches the ball. The bronze-on-bronze impact produces a distinct, audible tone. You do not need to be watching the instrument to know it has triggered. You hear it, and when you look, you see which toad holds a ball, which tells you exactly which compass direction the earthquake came from. The interior mechanism was not described in any text that survived the Han Dynasty. What we know about it comes from the Huhanshu, the Book of Later Han, one of the official Chinese dynastic histories, compiled by Fan Yi in the 5th century CE, which describes the instrument's function in detail but deliberately omits any description of its internal workings. The Huhanshu records the episode that proved the device's capabilities. In 138 CE, the instrument triggered. The dragon facing west-northwest released its ball. No one in Luoyang had felt an earthquake. Officials questioned the reading. 2 days later, a messenger arrived from Gansu province, roughly 500 miles to the west-northwest, reporting a major earthquake. The instrument had detected it before any human rider could carry news of it. What was inside the bronze jar? Modern analysis points to a suspended pendulum, a heavy mass hung centrally, connected to the 8 dragon mechanisms by levers. An earthquake's primary wave arrives as ground motion. The pendulum, by inertia, resists that motion momentarily while the vessel moves with it. The relative displacement the pendulum swinging against the direction of the incoming wave activates the lever connected to the dragon facing toward the wave's origin. One ball drops. The others stay. Feng Rui and a team at the Institute of Engineering Mechanics in Harbin published the first working replica in 2005, after more than a decade of research. Their model validated the pendulum lever interpretation and confirmed that the directional accuracy of the instrument matches the historical records. The replica works. The original design, as Zhang Heng built it, worked. The science inside the bronze jar was real and precise. The instrument lived and died inside the Taishi Ling for a reason that had nothing to do with engineering secrecy. In Han Dynasty cosmology, the ability to read the Earth's movements was an imperial divine attribute. Earthquakes were communications from heaven, indicating that the imperial mandate was either stable or threatened. The emperor's authority to interpret those communications was inseparable from the instrument that made interpretation possible. A device that could predict where the Earth moved before any human messenger could carry word was an instrument of imperial legitimacy. When the Han Dynasty fell in 220 CE, the bureau dissolved. The craftsmen dispersed. The instrument's mechanism, never written down, never transmitted outside the narrow channel of imperial appointment, did not survive the institutional structure that had housed it. Europe would not attempt a seismoscope until the 18th century CEA. Zhang Heng had built one in 132. From Han Dynasty China, where a machine that read the Earth's movements was locked inside the authority of the emperor, we travel now to the ancient city of Jerusalem, where a different kind of impossible tool was guarded by a different kind of institution, and where the secret of how it worked was buried the moment the institution that held it was destroyed. Number 3. The Shamir. The year is approximately 957 BCE. Jerusalem. King Solomon has a problem that the Almighty has created for him. He has been commanded to build the first temple, the house of God, the permanent dwelling of the Ark of the Covenant, using the most precisely cut stones in the ancient world. And he has been forbidden from using the one tool that could cut them. The prohibition is explicit and appears in multiple places in the Hebrew scripture. Iron tools are banned from the temple construction site. Iron is the metal of weapons war, blood, death. No implement used to kill may shape the house of the living God. The first book of Kings confirms what this meant in practice. Chapter 6, verse 7. When the temple was being built, it was built with stone dressed at the quarry, so that no hammer, chisel, or any iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. Every stone arrived at Jerusalem, already shaped to its final form, assembled in complete silence. The question of how this was accomplished is answered in the Talmud. The answer is the Shamir. Tractate Sada 48a describes the Shamir as one of 10 things created at twilight on the eve of the first Sabbath. Tractate Sanhedrin 59b describes its transmission, given first to Moses, who used it to engrave the names of the 12 tribes onto the gemstones of the high priest's breastplate stones so hard that no iron tool could cut them without shattering. Passed through priestly custody, it reached Solomon. Physical accounts across the Talmud, the Midrash, and the Tosefta are consistent with each other and specific enough to constitute a technical record. It was no larger than a barleycorn. Some accounts describe it as a worm, some as a stone, some as a substance that had to be kept wrapped in tufts of wool inside a lead container because contact with any surface would cause it to begin working immediately. What is consistent across every description is its effect. A line was marked in ink on whatever material needed cutting. The Shamir was placed on the line. The material split along it. No sound, no spark, no physical force applied, no waste. The technology was used for the entire construction of the first temple. Every stone shaped, every joint fitted, every gemstone cut for the priestly vestments. The most elaborately described stonework in ancient Israelite history was accomplished by a device no larger than a grain of barley. When the temple was complete, the Shamir was no longer needed. The decision recorded in the Talmudic sources is explicit. The Shamir was not stored for future use. It was not passed to the next generation of craftsmen. It was sealed, wrapped in layers of wool to prevent activation. Placed inside a container of lead, being chosen specifically because it was believed to be the one substance the Shamir could not cut, and buried under the foundations of the temple itself. The Talmudic commentary is direct about the reason. The Shamir was buried lest the world be destroyed. A device that can cut any material along any line without tools, without noise, and without physical contact has military applications that were fully apparent to the priests who held it. An army equipped with the Shamir could cut through the walls of any fortification in the ancient world, through gates, through chains, through ship hulls, through anything. The first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. Whether the lead container survived the destruction, whether it was captured, whether it was removed before the siege, is not recorded. No object matching the description has ever been identified in the archaeology of the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount today lies beneath the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The deepest archaeological layers, the foundation courses of Solomon's temple, have never been excavated. For reasons that are entirely political and religious rather than archaeological, the most consequential dig site in the ancient Near East has never been opened. Whatever the lead container holds, if it is still there, is still there. From Jerusalem, where a stone-cutting technology was buried beneath the temple foundations to prevent it from becoming a weapon, we travel now to the great workshops of Alexandria, where an engineer working in his father's barber shop discovered a force that no military in the ancient world had ever controlled, and where the authorities around him made sure that knowledge stayed inside a room that later burned to the ground. Number 4. The Ctesibius pneumatic arsenal. Alexandria, Egypt, approximately 285 BCE. A young man named Ctesibius is working in his father's barber shop on one of the busiest commercial streets in the ancient world. He is adjusting the counterweight system for a large mirror, a lead weight suspended inside a narrow tube to provide smooth vertical motion. When the weight moves through the tube, he notices something no one has specifically cataloged before. Compressed air makes a sound. The air ahead of the descending weight has nowhere to go. It compresses. It pushes back. When it finally escapes through a gap, it produces a tone. From that observation, Ctesibius builds a career and an arsenal. He becomes the founder of the Alexandrian School of Pneumatics and Hydraulics, working within the Mouseion, the great research institution of Alexandria, under the patronage of Ptolemy II Philadelphus. His surviving inventions include the first force pump with pistons and check valves, the hydraules, the world's first keyboard instrument, and a significantly improved water clock whose float mechanism drove moving figures and indicators. These inventions alone would place him among the most consequential engineers in ancient history. The aerotonin is the invention that was classified. A catapult driven not by twisted sinew, not by bent wood, not by any organic elastic material, but by compressed air in bronze cylinders. 2 bronze chambers, each fitted with a tightly machined piston. The operator compresses air into the chambers by driving the pistons down with a lever mechanism. The compressed air is held by valve assemblies. At the moment of firing, the valves release simultaneously, and the stored pneumatic pressure drives the firing arms forward with a force that Vitruvius, writing in the 1st century BCE, records as exceeding the output of comparable sinew-powered artillery while maintaining consistent performance across all weather conditions. That last detail is the military significance. Sinew catapults, the standard heavy artillery of every ancient army, lost tension in cold, stretched in moisture, and dried to brittleness in heat. Every general who depended on them depended on weather he could not control. The aerotonin had no sinew. Bronze cylinders and machine pistons performed identically in Egyptian summer heat and North African winter cold. A weather-independent heavy artillery piece firing at greater velocity than anything else in the field was not a marginal improvement over existing weapons. It was the end of existing weapons. Ptolemy II Philadelphus did not announce the demonstration publicly. He convened his military council, had Ctesibius demonstrate the aerotonin against a test target, and in the same session ordered the engineering specifications classified. The documentation went into the restricted military archive of the Mouseion, not the public catalog, not the general collection, but the specifically controlled section accessible only to authorized military engineers of the Ptolemaic government. No visiting scholar, no foreign diplomat, no provincial military commander without explicit clearance would see those documents. Vitruvius, writing in the 20s BCE, more than 2 centuries after Ctesibius, describes the aerotonin in De Architectura in terms that confirm it existed and functioned. His description is sufficient to understand what the device did. It is not sufficient to build one. Hero of Alexandria, writing a century after Vitruvius, references Ctesibius's pneumatic work with the same limitation. Enough to confirm, not enough to construct. The reason is specific. In 48 BCE, Julius Caesar laid siege to Alexandria. The harbor district burned. Caesar himself, in his account of the Civil War, describes ordering fire set among the ships to prevent their use against him. The fire spread beyond the ships. The warehouse district that stored the Mouseion's overflow collections, including the restricted military archive, was among what burned that night. Ctesibius's specifications for the pneumatic catapult, sealed inside a Ptolemaic military classification for more than 2 centuries, burned inside the same warehouse fire as so much else. Ctesibius understood what he had found. One fragment of what appears to be his own words, preserved in Hero's writings, reads, "The compression of air produces forces that nature has prepared, but men have not yet learned to direct." He was directing those forces in 285 BCE. The specifications for how he did it were restricted the morning of their first demonstration, and they stayed restricted through every change of government until the archive that held them ceased to exist. From the sealed workshops of Alexandria, where a compressed air weapon was locked away the morning after its first demonstration, we move forward 1 generation in the same city, where another engineer built a device for automatic killing and whose blueprints burned in the same fire that took everything else. Number 5. The Polybolos. Alexandria, approximately 270 BCE. The same city as Ctesibius, 1 generation later, the same institutional patron. Ptolemy II Philadelphus. An engineer named Dionysius of Alexandria is working in the Ptolemaic military workshops, and he builds something that operates on a mechanical principle that will not be independently invented anywhere else on Earth for approximately 800 years. The device is called the Polybolos. The name means multi-thrower. It is a bolt-firing artillery piece that does not require manual loading, cocking, or resetting between shots. A single operator works a hand crank. As long as the crank turns, the device feeds, cocks, aims, and fires continuously. The mechanism that makes this possible is a chain drive, a loop of linked metal segments rotating around two tooth sprockets, one driven by the crank, one driving the bolt feed and firing mechanism. The rotation of the chain carries the bolt carrier forward on one pass and returns the feed mechanism on the return. The result is uninterrupted fire at the rate the operator can turn the crank. The chain drive is the invention. A continuous loop of linked segments transmitting rotational force around a track defined by two toothed wheels. That is the description of a bicycle chain. It is the mechanical principle inside motorcycle transmissions, chainsaw drives, and timing chains in automobile engines. Dionysius of Alexandria was rotating a chain around sprockets in 270 BCE. The documentation that survives comes from Hero of Alexandria, writing in approximately 60 CE, more than 3 centuries after the Polybolos was built. Hero's Bella Poeca, his treatise on catapult engineering, describes the Polybolos by name, attributes it to Dionysius explicitly, and describes what it does with enough clarity to confirm the chain feed mechanism existed and functioned. What Hero does not provide are the specifications, the link geometry, the sprocket tooth count and pitch, the chain tension calculations, the alignment tolerances for the feed mechanism. He describes the device the way a man describes a machine he has read about in someone else's account of an account, because that is precisely what Hero is doing. The complete documentation had been in the restricted military archive of the Mausian Prongen. Since the morning Dionysius demonstrated the Polybolos to Ptolemy II Philadelphus. The same classification system that held Ctesibius's pneumatic catapult specifications also held the chain drive documentation. An artillery piece capable of continuous fire from a single operator was not a weapon the Ptolemaic military shared. It went into the restricted section. It stayed there. In 48 BCE, Julius Caesar ordered fire set in the harbor district of Alexandria. The fire spread to the warehouse areas where the Mausians stored overflow collections, including the military restricted archive. The Polybolos specifications sealed under Ptolemaic military classification for approximately 220 years burned in that fire. Hero of Alexandria was born approximately 20 years after the fire destroyed those documents. When he wrote the Bella Poeca, he was reconstructing from second-hand sources what the chain mechanism had accomplished, without the primary engineering documents that would have explained how it was built. The chain drive does not appear in the European engineering record again until the notebooks of Leonardo da Vinci in the 1490s CE, where he sketches the principle but does not implement it. Hans Reynold in Manchester introduces the modern precision roller chain in 1880 CE. The gap between Dionysius's working chain drive artillery piece in 270 BCE and Reynolds' bicycle chain in 1880 CE is 2,150 years. The chain drive that runs the modern world in bicycles, in motorcycles, in automobile engines, in industrial machinery was invented, used in a functional weapon, classified by a military government, stored in a restricted archive, and destroyed in an accidental fire on a single night in 48 BCE. Not lost through neglect, not faded through misuse. Destroyed specifically because the archive that held it was storing military secrets that a foreign general's fire consumed. The Polybolos was the world's first automatic weapon. Its mechanism is the foundational drive technology of the industrial age. The blueprints burned with the harbor warehouse in Alexandria and did not come back for 1,800 years. From the burning warehouses of Alexandria weapon disappeared into the same fire as so much else. We travel now west and south, across the ocean, to the mountains of Peru, where a civilization built a machine out of stone and sound that no amount of iron could match and sealed it underground before they left. Number 6. The Chavin de Huantar acoustic weapon, 900 BCE. The northern highlands of Peru, in a valley at the confluence of two rivers, 10,200 feet above sea level. The construction crew working at Chavin de Huantar is not building a temple in the conventional sense, a space for worship, a monument to divine power, a place where the human opens itself toward the divine. They are building a machine. The machine is made of stone. It is designed to run on sound. The site covers approximately 40 acres of ceremonial architecture. Beneath the main platform, beneath the stone surface, where pilgrims from across the Andean world have traveled days and weeks to stand, is a network of underground stone galleries that runs for more than a kilometer in total length. The galleries are narrow, low-ceilinged, cut in precise dimensions from blocks of fitted stone. They are designed to be walked through in the dark. What happens inside them when they are in operation is what Miriam Kohler, an ethnomusicologist working first through Harvard and then through Stanford, has spent more than a decade measuring. Kohler's research, published in PLOS 1 in 2012, is the definitive acoustic analysis of the Chavin gallery system. Her findings are specific and reproducible. The gallery geometry creates standing waves at precise frequencies. The narrow stone corridors generate interference patterns. The stone walls produce flutter echoes. When a sound source is introduced at the right frequency, the entire underground structure becomes a sound envelope, an instrument the size of a building, designed to produce specific perceptual effects in anyone moving through it. The sound sources the priests used were pututus, trumpets cut from Strombus princeps, the giant conch shells of the Pacific, transported hundreds of miles inland to Chavin. Kohler's acoustic analysis matches the resonant frequencies of the pututus directly to the resonant peaks of the gallery geometry. This is not coincidence. The two systems were engineered together, building and horn, stone and shell, to produce a unified acoustic effect. The effect is not subtle. Standing wave interference patterns at the frequencies generated by the pututus cause specific perceptual disruptions. Spatial disorientation, the sensation that sound is coming from inside the listener's own head rather than from a source, auditory phenomena indistinguishable in subjective experience from hallucination. The flutter echoes produce sounds that appear from nowhere and cease without cause. An initiate walking through the Chavin galleries in the dark, with pututus sounding somewhere in the stone labyrinth ahead, was experiencing a precisely engineered sensory environment designed to make the boundaries between the physical and the divine feel indistinguishable. The priests who operated this system understood exactly what they were controlling. Access to the gallery system was restricted. The architectural arrangement, the narrow passages, the deliberate darkness, the acoustic isolation from the outside world ensured that only those the priests permitted to enter would ever experience what the galleries produced. The acoustic knowledge required to operate the system, where to stand, which frequencies to play, how to move through the labyrinth while playing to maximize the interference effects, was priestly knowledge. Knowledge held by the people who ran the machine. John Rick, the Stanford archaeologist who has directed excavations at Chavin de Huantar for more than 2 decades, confirmed what the archaeological record shows happened around 200 BCE, when the Chavin culture abandoned the site. The gallery entrances were not left open. They were not allowed to collapse on their own. They were deliberately sealed rubble packed into the access points, the passages blocked at the entry corridors. The sealing is systematic and consistent across every entrance. Organized, intentional. The people who built the machine buried it before they left. The acoustic frequencies. The specific resonant peaks that match the pututu trumpets to the gallery geometry. The knowledge of where to stand and how to move a person through the sound field toward maximum perceptual effect. None of it was written down. None of it was written down. None of it was transmitted to any successor tradition. The rubble went in, the galleries went dark, and the machine went silent. From the sealed galleries of Chavin, where the most sophisticated acoustic engineering in the ancient Americas was packed in stone and abandoned, we travel north and east across the ocean to Alexandria, where an engineer working in his father's barbershop discovered a force that no military in the ancient world had ever controlled, and where the authorities around him made sure that knowledge stayed inside a room that later burned to the ground. Number 7. The Alexandria steam turbine. Approximately 60 CE, Alexandria, Egypt. The greatest research institution in the ancient world, the Mouseion, is still operating, though its best days are behind it. One of its scholars is a man named Hero of Alexandria, known also as Heron, whose precise biography is lost, but whose work survives in texts that were not fully appreciated until engineers of the modern industrial era read them and realized they were looking at engineering that predated their own by 15 centuries. Hero's Aeolipile is the first documented steam turbine in recorded history. The device is not a rough experiment or a theoretical diagram. It is a functioning mechanical system. A sealed bronze boiler holds water over a heat source. Steam from the boiler is directed through 2 pipes into a hollow bronze sphere mounted on a central axis. The steam exits the sphere through 2 L-shaped nozzles pointing in opposite directions, one on each side. The reactive force of the exiting steam, the same principle that drives a modern jet turbine, causes the sphere to rotate. The sphere spins continuously, as long as the fire burns and the boiler holds water. What Hero built was a reaction turbine. The mechanical principle is identical to the turbine stage inside a modern steam power plant. Thomas Newcomen built the first practical steam engine in 1712 CE, more than 16 centuries later. Hero was not working toward a steam engine in the industrial sense. His texts do not describe applying the device to any load-bearing mechanical work. What Hero was doing with steam power was more sophisticated in one specific way. He was hiding it. The automatic temple doors are the clearest example. Hero describes the mechanism in his Pneumatica, a comprehensive text on the behavior of air, steam, and fluid pressure, written in a matter-of-fact engineering tone that has no mystical content whatsoever. Beneath the altar is an airtight metal globe, half filled with water. As the altar fire heats the globe, expanding air forces water through a siphon into a hanging bucket. The bucket's weight descends on a pulley system connected to the temple door axles. The doors swing open. When the fire goes out, the globe cools, water returns through the siphon, and counterweights close the doors. The mechanism is completely hidden beneath the floor. What the worshipper sees. A priest lights a fire, and the temple doors open by themselves. What they do not see is a sealed globe, a water system, a set of pulleys, and a sphere rotating below their feet. Hero's texts also describe a coin-operated device that dispensed a fixed amount of holy water, the first vending machine in recorded history, and a programmable theatrical automaton driven by falling weights, using a system of pegs and cords to produce a sequence of pre-programmed mechanical actions. All of it deployed under the architecture of temple ritual, its mechanical nature concealed, and its effects appearing divine. The specific institutional structure that made this possible was the priestly engineering tradition of the late Hellenistic and Roman period Egyptian temples. The priests who maintained these devices were not advertising their technical knowledge. They were deploying it as the infrastructure of religious experience. The device was the miracle. The miracle required the device to remain invisible. This is not cynicism in the cosmology of the ancient temple. The divine presence was real, and the mechanism was the means through which the divine presence made itself known. The Serapeum, the great temple of Alexandria, was destroyed in 391 CE on the orders of the Christian bishop Theophilus, backed by a decree of Emperor Theodosius. The priestly tradition that had maintained the mechanical devices was dispersed and did not reconstitute. Hero's texts survived because they were copied into the Byzantine manuscript tradition, but the texts describe the mechanisms without transmitting the manufacturing knowledge, the calibration procedures, the material specifications for building them. Europe's first practical steam engine came in 1712. The engineering principle had been built and deployed 16 centuries earlier, concealed beneath the altar fires of Alexandria's temples, and buried when the institution that maintained it was burned to the ground. From Alexandria, where engineering was hidden inside divinity and lost when the temples fell, we travel now northwest to a small island called Antikythera, where something was resting on the bottom of the sea for 2,000 years, and where, when divers finally brought it to the surface in 1901, no one in the world had a category for what they were looking at. Number 8. The Antikythera mechanism. Somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean, approximately 65 BCE. A ship carrying Greek bronze and marble statues, glassware and wine, is caught in a storm. The ship goes down off the coast of a small island called Antikythera, between the southern tip of the Greek mainland and the northern coast of Crete. The statues settle into the silt. The wine amphorae stack against each other. And in a wooden case, a device that does not belong with decorative cargo comes to rest on the seafloor. It will stay there for 2,100 years. 1901. Greek sponge divers working the wreck site's surface with encrusted bronze fragments. Archaeologist Valerio Stiais examines the fragments in 1902 and identifies one of them as a mechanical device, a wheel, a gear, a tooth pattern pressed into corroded bronze. His colleagues question the identification. A precision-geared mechanism in a Roman-era wreck seemed in 1902 simply incorrect. It could not be what it appeared to be. It was exactly what it appeared to be. The 82 fragments recovered from the Antikythera wreck are pieces of a single unified mechanical system, an analog computer. The Antikythera mechanism, named for the island above which it sank, uses a minimum of 72 precision-cut bronze gears arranged in a configuration that calculates, simultaneously and continuously, the position of the Sun in the zodiac, the position and phase of the Moon, the positions of all 5 planets known to ancient astronomy: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn eclipse predictions, using the Saros cycle of 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, and the 19-year Metonic cycle, after which lunar phases repeat on the same calendar dates. Tony Freeth and a research team at University College London published definitive reconstruction in 2021, after 15 years of analysis. Their model requires 82 gears to replicate all documented functions. The device fits inside a wooden box approximately 13 by 7 by 3 inches. Turn the hand crank on the side. The gear train moves, the dials advance, the eclipse predictor steps forward, the planetary position indicators update. All simultaneously. All correctly. Freeth's team calculated the mechanism's error rate at less than 1 degree per century. The first mechanical clock in Europe appears in the late 13th century CEE. The Antikythera mechanism predates it by 1400 years. It is a computer. It was built by the ancient Greeks, and the workshop tradition that built it was erased before it could build another one. The research consensus from Freeth, from Alexander Jones at New York University, from James Evans at the University of Puget Sound identifies Rhodes as the mechanism's origin. Specifically, the school of Hipparchus, who developed the mathematical framework for precisely the calculations the mechanism performs. The gear ratios match Hipparchus's own values for the lunar and solar cycles to a precision that argues direct access to his calculations. This device was built by people who had his notebooks in front of them. Rhodes occupied a deteriorating position in the Roman world. After the Battle of Pydna in 168 BCE ended Macedonian independence. Rome progressively reduced Rhodian autonomy, trade restrictions, political pressure, the absorption of Greek institutions into Roman administrative structures. The Rhodian school of mechanics was operating inside an increasingly Roman political environment that had a specific reason to be hostile to what this device represented. The Roman Republican calendar was controlled by the College of Pontiffs priests, who held the legal authority to insert days, remove days, and declare certain dates inauspicious, controlling the rhythm of public and political life. The power to control the calendar was the power to control the timing of law. An independent astronomical computing device, one that allowed any educated person to calculate the correct date, the correct eclipse, the correct lunar phase, without reference to any priestly authority, was not a neutral scientific instrument. It was a political instrument, a device that made the pontiff's calendar authority irrelevant. The Rhodian school was absorbed into the Roman system. Its scholars dispersed. The mechanism was being shipped to Rome as diplomatic gift or as spoil when the ship sank off Antikythera. No second device has ever been found. No ancient text describes how to build one. The workshop that cut those gears and assembled that gear train did not transmit its methods to any successor institution. What went into the sea in 65 BCE stayed in the sea. Freeth's team at UCL spent 15 years recovering what 2,000 years of seawater had left of it. From the seafloor off Antikythera, where a computer lay in the dark for 2,100 years, we travel now to the island of Crete, where a civilization 3,000 years before Rome had already solved a problem most of Europe would not solve until the 19th century, and where, when the time came to leave, they sealed their most advanced knowledge inside the walls and left without it. Number 9. The Knossos hydraulic system, 1900 CEE. Crete. British archaeologist Arthur Evans begins excavating a massive Bronze Age site near the northern coast of the island at a location the locals call Knossos. What Evans uncovers over the next 3 decades is not a ruin in the conventional sense. It is an architectural complex of approximately 6 acres, containing more than 1,300 rooms across multiple stories, with a drainage and water distribution infrastructure that Evans, an Englishman familiar with the most advanced plumbing of the Victorian era, finds immediately impressive. Nothing in the European Bronze Age is supposed to look like this. The palace at Knossos was occupied from approximately 1700 to 1450 BCE. Its water supply system used fired clay pipes, manufactured to standardized dimensions, fitted end to end with joints sealed using hydraulic cement. The pipes brought fresh water from sources uphill and distributed it through the building. What Evans found in the Queen's Megaron, the royal women's quarters, was a flush toilet. A stone-lined latrine with a seat connected through clay pipes to a drainage channel that ran to the exterior of the building. The toilet could be flushed with water poured from a vessel into a channel above the seat. This is 1700 BCE. Rome's advanced sanitation infrastructure begins in earnest around 300 BCE, more than 1,000 years later. The Knossos pipe system has a feature that modern engineers examining it have found particularly striking. The pipes taper. Each pipe is slightly narrower at its outlet end than at its inlet. This tapering, maintained consistently across the entire network, is not a manufacturing accident. It is the application of the Venturi principle. Constricting a fluid passage increases velocity in a manner that self-clears blockages and maintains flow rate across long runs of pipe. Giovanni Battista Venturi formally described this principle in 1797 CE. The Minoan builders at Knossos were applying it roughly 3,400 years earlier. The site also maintained two completely separate underground drainage networks. One carried sewage and gray water out of the building. The other carried storm water from the roof and courtyard surfaces. The pipes of the two systems are different sizes and made of different materials, running at different depths through the bedrock beneath the palace. Stone-lined maintenance channels, large enough for a worker to move through, run alongside the pipe routes so that the drainage infrastructure could be accessed and repaired without excavating the building from above. This is infrastructure built to be maintained over generations. The distinction between separate sewage and stormwater drainage systems did not reappear in Western urban planning until the sanitation reforms of the 19th century CE. London's combined sewage-stormwater system, which produced catastrophic disease outbreaks when the two streams mixed, was a source of public health crisis in the 1850s. The Minoans had already solved this problem at Knossos in 1700 BCE. The Minoan civilization collapsed in stages beginning around 1450 BCE. Following the massive volcanic eruption at Thera, the island now called Santorini, which geologists date to approximately 1628 BCE, based on ice core and tree ring evidence. The eruption triggered tsunamis and deposited ash across Crete's agricultural zones. The palace centers of Knossos and the other Minoan sites show destruction and abandonment in the archaeological record corresponding to this period. What the evidence at Knossos shows is not chaotic flight. Room-ceiling doorways blocked with stone or filled with earth, storage areas closed off has been documented across sections of the palace that archaeologists describe as organized archiving rather than panic abandonment. The departure appears to have been planned. The hydraulic infrastructure fixed in stone and clay in the bedrock of the hill could not be carried. It was left. The knowledge of how to build it, if it survived at all, went with whoever carried it out of Crete. The Mycenaean Greeks who moved into Knossos after the Minoan collapse left no evidence of operating or maintaining the hydraulic system. No comparable water distribution infrastructure appears in any Mycenaean site in Greece or Crete. The engineers who built Knossos' plumbing, who understood tapered pipe hydraulics, separate drainage networks, and flush sanitation did not transmit that understanding to the civilization that followed them. Most of Europe would not have running water inside buildings until the 19th century CE, approximately 3,500 years after the Minoans built it into the floors at Knossos. From the sealed palace of Knossos, we travel north and east to the mountains of ancient Anatolia, where another empire held a different kind of secret, and when the time came to lose it, chose to burn the evidence themselves. Number 10. The Hittite iron formula, 1200 BCE, Central Anatolia, in the mountains of what is now Turkey. The Hittite Empire at its peak, the only military power in the ancient Near East that Egypt could not defeat, is in the final hours of its existence. The city of Hattusa, the Hittite capital, is burning. No invading army caused this fire. The destruction evidence is conclusive. The burning is systematic, organized, and internal. The Hittites burned their own capital. The knowledge that could not be allowed to fall into other hands had been in the empire's possession for 500 years. Around 1700 BCE, Hittite metallurgists in the highland regions of Anatolia mastered the smelting of iron, not the occasional use of iron from meteorites, which predates this by centuries, not iron-adjacent copper alloys. The deliberate, repeatable extraction of workable iron from ore, using purpose-built smelting technology capable of reaching and sustaining temperatures above 2000 Berbit. 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 1000 degrees hotter than what bronze production requires. Iron at this temperature, extracted and worked through a specific quenching and tempering process, produces a metal harder and more structurally capable than any bronze alloy achievable with ancient technology. A Hittite iron weapon against a bronze weapon is not a marginal advantage. It is an asymmetric one. The iron blade holds its edge through impacts that shatter or bend a bronze blade. The iron-armed fighter carries an advantage no amount of tactical skill compensates for. The Hittite Empire understood this advantage precisely. The Amarna letters, a diplomatic archive of clay tablets discovered in Egypt in 1887, comprising correspondence between the great powers of the ancient Near East, include multiple references to iron as a substance of extraordinary value, requested by foreign rulers and carefully rationed by the Hittites. A letter from Hattusili III, dated to approximately 1260 BCE, responds to a request for iron with a statement that scholars have read for a century as a careful diplomatic deflection. As for the iron about which you wrote to me, good iron is not available in my seal house in Kizawatna. That it is a bad time for producing iron I have written. They will produce good iron, but as yet they will not have finished. When they have finished I shall send it to you. Today now I am dispatching an iron dagger blade. He sent a single dagger. He did not send the formula. He did not send the smiths. He did not describe the process. The deflection is polite, specific, and complete. Hittite iron production was controlled through the overseer of metal workers, accountable directly to the palace. Smiths trained in iron smelting were not free artisans, they were bound to their workshops, and the penalty for transmitting iron-working knowledge to foreign agents was death. At the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE, the largest chariot battle in history, involving approximately 5,000 chariots across both sides, the Hittites fielded iron fittings against Egypt's bronze. The battle ended in the Egyptian-Hittite Treaty of 1259 BCE, history's first documented peace treaty. A draw against the most powerful army in the ancient world, maintained by iron. Around 1200 to 1150 BCE, the Bronze Age collapse swept the eastern Mediterranean. The Hittite Empire, Mycenaean Greece, the Kassite dynasty of Babylon, and the city of Ugarit all collapsed within approximately 50 years. The outcome for iron is measurable. The early Iron Age iron that appears in the archaeological record immediately after the Hittite collapse is inferior to Hittite iron. Metallurgist Anil Bhattacharya and colleagues have confirmed that the specific characteristics of Hittite iron, controlled quenching, consistent alloy composition, deliberate tempering, are absent in the iron that followed. The Hittite smiths took the formula with them. The Hittite king burned the capital around it. 30,000 tablets were recovered from Hattusa, and none contain a metallurgical specification. The most consequential industrial process in human history at that moment was not written down, or if it was, it burned in 1200 BCE, along with everything else. These 10 technologies, the mechanical dove of Archaetas, dismantled by the Brotherhood that built it, the Zhang Heng seismoscope locked inside the Imperial Bureau until the dynasty fell, the Shamir sealed beneath the temple foundations, the Ctesibius pneumatic arsenal classified at demonstration and burned with the archive, the Polybolos chain-drive weapon whose blueprints burned in the same Alexandrian fire, the Chavin de Huanter acoustic galleries sealed inside a mountain when the priests left, the Alexandria steam turbine hidden beneath the altar fires until the temples burned, the Antikythera mechanism swallowed by the sea for 2,000 years, the Knossos hydraulic system sealed inside the palace walls when the Minoans left Crete, and the Hittite iron formula buried inside a capital the Hittites burned themselves were not lost by accident. Each one was hidden by people who understood exactly what they were hiding and made a specific, deliberate decision about what the world was not ready to hold. They were right about that. The question they left open is whether we are any more ready now. If this made you think, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Like the video if these 10 made you reconsider what ancient civilizations were actually capable of. And drop a comment below, tell us where you're watching from, and which of these technologies you think we are still closest to recovering. Story complete.